Before it revolutionized TV comedy, Soap survived boycotts from religious groups who never even watched it, featured a creator who moonlighted as a prostitute on her own show, and had a sound engineer so fooled by a ventriloquist that he pointed microphones at a wooden dummy. From announcer mix-ups that launched careers to bizarre alien storylines that weren't in the original script, this groundbreaking sitcom hid secrets more outrageous than its soap opera plotlines. Fact 1. Soap was never supposed to be the title. When television history was being made in 1977, one of the most groundbreaking sitcoms of all time almost had a completely different name. The title that would become iconic across 4 seasons and 93 episodes was actually just a temporary placeholder that the creators never bothered to change. Susan Harris, the brilliant writer and producer behind the show, along with her production partners Paul Younger-Witt and Tony Thomas, spent months developing their revolutionary comedy that would parody daytime soap operas. Throughout the entire pre-production process, they referred to their project simply as Soap because it captured the essence of what they were creating: a nighttime comedy that would satirize the melodramatic world of daytime television dramas. The problem was that Soap was never meant to be permanent. The production team actively searched for a more creative, memorable title that would better represent their ambitious vision for the show. They wanted something that would convey the wit, sophistication, and boundary-pushing nature of their comedy while still making it clear that this was a parody of soap opera conventions. Week after week, the producers brainstormed alternatives, throwing around different ideas and testing various titles with network executives and focus groups. They explored options that would highlight the show's satirical nature, its ensemble cast, or its revolutionary approach to television comedy. However, despite their extensive efforts and creative discussions, nothing they came up with felt quite right. As production deadlines approached and the show moved closer to its premiere date, the team found themselves still without a replacement title they could all agree on. The working title Soap had become so embedded in their discussions, scripts, and promotional materials that changing it would have required significant effort and coordination across multiple departments. Eventually, the producers made the practical decision to stick with what they had. Soap was simple, direct, and immediately communicated the show's connection to the soap opera genre it was parodying, so it became the official title when the series went into full production. Fact 2. The sound engineer kept miking the dummy. During the early production days of Soap, the sound crew encountered one of the most unusual recording problems in television history when they couldn't figure out where the voice of Bob Campbell was actually coming from. Jay Johnson, who played the shy ventriloquist Chuck Campbell, was so masterful at his craft that he completely fooled the professional audio technicians working on the show. Bob was Chuck's wooden ventriloquist dummy, a 3-foot-tall figure with apple cheeks, large eyes, and brown hair, who served as Chuck's aggressive, sarcastic alter ego. While Chuck was meek and polite, Bob was rude, obnoxious, and said terrible things to everyone around him, which made for some of the show's funniest moments. The character dynamic required Johnson to switch seamlessly between Chuck's quiet, nervous personality and Bob's loud, abrasive comments. The problem arose because Johnson's ventriloquist skills were so convincing that the sound engineer repeatedly made the same mistake during filming. Every time Bob had lines to deliver, the audio technician would instinctively point the boom microphone toward the wooden dummy instead of toward Johnson, who was actually providing the voice. This happened over and over again during the early episodes, causing delays and confusion on set. The sound crew was essentially experiencing what ventriloquists call the illusion in real time. Johnson had trained for years to perfect his ability to throw his voice and move Bob's mouth in perfect synchronization while keeping his own lips barely moving. His performance was so seamless that even trained professionals whose job it was to capture audio couldn't tell where the sound was really originating. This technical mishap actually became a testament to Johnson's extraordinary talent as a performer. The fact that experienced sound engineers were being fooled by his ventriloquist act proved just how convincing his dual performance as Chuck and Bob really was. Once the crew figured out what was happening, they were able to properly position their equipment, but the initial confusion showed that Johnson's schizophrenic performance was fooling everyone on set, not just the television audience. Fact 3. Casey Kasem quit after 1 episode. One of radio's most beloved voices almost became the narrator of Soap. But Casey Kasem walked away from the project after just 1 episode because he couldn't handle what the show was planning to put on television. The legendary disc jockey, who was famous for hosting American Top 40, and later became the voice of Shaggy in Scooby-Doo cartoons, was originally hired to provide the opening and closing narration for the groundbreaking sitcom. Qasim was supposed to be the voice that would guide viewers through the complicated storylines each week, delivering the now famous opening that introduced the Tate and Campbell families and their various secrets and scandals. He would have been responsible for the dramatic recaps at the beginning of each episode and the cliffhanger questions at the end that kept audiences coming back for more. However, after recording the pilot episode and seeing the full scope of what Soap was planning to tackle in its upcoming storylines, Qasim made the decision to leave the project. The show's content, which included topics like homosexuality, adultery, murder, organized crime, and various other controversial subjects, was simply too much for the family-friendly radio personality to feel comfortable being associated with. At the time, Soap was pushing boundaries that no other television show had dared to cross, and Qasim, who had built his career on wholesome entertainment, felt that his participation in the project would conflict with his public image and personal values. His departure from the show happened so quickly that the producers had to scramble to find a replacement narrator before the series premiered. This sudden exit opened the door for Roddy, a former radio disc jockey who was looking to break into television work. Roddy stepped in to replace Qasim and ended up delivering those memorable opening and closing narrations with his distinctive deadpan style, asking questions like, "Will Jessica discover Chester's affair? Will Benson discover Chester's affair? Will Benson care?" His work on Soap would eventually lead him to become the announcer on The Price is Right for 17 years. Fact 4. Susan Harris played a hooker on her own show. In one of the most surprising cameo appearances in television history, Susan Harris, the brilliant creator and primary writer of Soap, decided to step in front of the camera to play a prostitute on her own groundbreaking sitcom. Harris appeared as a character named Babette in episodes 15 and 17 of the first season, bringing an entirely new meaning to the phrase, hands-on producer. Harris was already breaking new ground as one of the most prolific television writers of her era, having created 13 comedy series between 1975 and 1998. She wrote or co-wrote every single episode of Soap throughout its 4-season run, crafting the complex, interconnected storylines that made the show so addictive for viewers. Her writing tackled controversial subjects like homosexuality, mental illness, organized crime, and extramarital affairs with a combination of sharp wit and genuine heart that had never been seen on television before. The decision to cast herself as Babette was particularly bold given that Soap was already facing intense scrutiny from religious groups and conservative critics who were outraged by the show's content. Harris was putting herself directly into one of the most controversial storylines on a show that was already being called morally objectionable by its detractors. What makes this cameo even more remarkable is that Harris was simultaneously juggling the enormous responsibility of running the entire creative side of the production. She was writing scripts, overseeing story development, working with network executives who were nervous about the show's content, and dealing with the constant pressure from censors who wanted to tone down the more provocative elements of her stories. Harris appeared as Babette during a time when the show was still finding its audience, and proving that it could survive the controversy that had surrounded it from the very beginning. Her willingness to literally put herself into the action demonstrated her complete commitment to the vision she had created and her refusal to be intimidated by the critics who wanted to see Soap fail. Fact 5. Chuck and Bob were originally murderers. The most beloved and memorable characters on Soap were never supposed to stick around long enough to become fan favorites, and their original storyline would have made them cold-blooded killers instead of the lovable misfits that audiences came to adore. Chuck Campbell, the shy ventriloquist, and his wooden dummy Bob were initially written as temporary guest characters who would appear for just a few episodes before disappearing from the show forever. In Susan Harris's original vision for the first season, Chuck and Bob were going to be responsible for one of the show's biggest mysteries: the murder of Peter Campbell, the tennis instructor who was having affairs with both Jessica Tate and her daughter Corinne. Peter's death became the central murder mystery that drove much of the first season's drama, with various family members falling under suspicion and Jessica eventually being arrested and put on trial for the crime. The plan was for Chuck and Bob to commit this murder and then have their storyline reach a dramatic conclusion in a courtroom scene where Bob, the ventriloquist dummy, would actually testify against Chuck in court. This bizarre legal scenario would have been the ultimate expression of Chuck's psychological breakdown, with the wooden dummy literally taking the witness stand to reveal the truth about the crime while Chuck sat helplessly nearby. However, something unexpected happened during the early episodes that completely changed the direction of the show. Jay Johnson's performance as both Chuck and Bob was so compelling and entertaining that audiences immediately fell in love with the characters. The combination of Chuck's nervous, timid personality and Bob's rude, aggressive comments created a dynamic that was both hilarious and oddly touching. When the positive response to Chuck and Bob became clear, Susan Harris made the decision to completely rewrite the murder mystery storyline. She changed the identity of Peter Campbell's killer entirely, allowing Chuck and Bob to remain on the show as regular characters instead of being written out as murderers. This last-minute change meant that Chuck and Bob stayed with Soap for the entire 4-season run. Fact 6. 20 TV stations refused to air the show. Before Soap even had a chance to prove itself on television, 20 local stations across America decided they wanted nothing to do with the controversial new sitcom, creating one of the biggest network affiliate boycotts in television history. When the show premiered on September 13, 1977, 18 out of 195 ABC affiliate stations flat out refused to broadcast the program to their local audiences. The boycott began months before the show actually aired. Sparked by a misleading Newsweek article and pressure from religious organizations who had never actually seen the pilot episode. Local station managers were fielding angry phone calls from community leaders and religious groups who were demanding that the show be banned from their airwaves, based entirely on rumors and second-hand reports about its content. Many of these station executives were genuinely concerned about losing advertisers and facing backlash from their local communities if they aired a show that was being described as morally objectionable. Some stations received threats of organized boycotts against their other programming and local businesses that advertised with them, creating real financial pressure to distance themselves from Soap. The situation got even worse during the show's second week on the air, when 2 additional affiliate stations decided to join the boycott, bringing the total number of refusing stations to 20. This meant that viewers in those markets were completely unable to watch Soap unless they could pick up signals from neighboring cities or had cable television access to distant ABC stations. The stations that did agree to air Soap often made significant changes to when it was broadcast. Instead of showing it during its scheduled 9:30 p.m. primetime slot, many affiliates moved the program to after 11 p.m., treating it like late-night adult programming that needed to be kept away from younger viewers and families. This unprecedented level of affiliate resistance demonstrated just how controversial Soap was before audiences even had a chance to see what the show was actually about, and it created a situation where ABC was essentially fighting a public relations battle on multiple fronts while trying to launch their new sitcom. Fact 7. A Newsweek critic trashed it without watching. In June of 1977, Newsweek television critic Harry F. Waters wrote a scathing review of Soap that would spark nationwide controversy and protests. But there was one major problem with his harsh critique. He had never actually watched the show he was attacking. Waters published his damning preview of the fall television season based entirely on rumors, speculation, and second-hand information about what Soap might contain. The most damaging part of Waters' review was his claim that Soap included a scene where a Catholic priest was being seduced in a confessional booth. This specific allegation sent shockwaves through religious communities across America and became one of the primary reasons that local church groups began organizing boycotts against the show before it even premiered. The problem was that this scene had never been written into any script, never been filmed, and never existed in any form whatsoever. Waters had somehow gotten his information completely wrong, but his influential platform at Newsweek meant that millions of readers accepted his description as fact. The false information spread rapidly through religious organizations and conservative groups who used Waters' review as evidence that Soap was an attack on Christian values. Waters also characterized some of the show's basic plot elements incorrectly and offered exaggerated reports about its sexual content, calling it a sex farce and claiming it was so saturated with sex that it could replace violence as the PTA's video enemy #1. His review painted a picture of a show that was far more explicit and offensive than what Susan Harris had actually created. Whether Waters' errors and misrepresentations were intentional or accidental remains unknown to this day. But the damage was immediate and severe. Within days of the Newsweek article being published, local and national religious organizations began mobilizing against Soap, despite the fact that they also had not seen the pilot episode. Waters' inaccurate review became the foundation for months of protests and boycotts that nearly destroyed the show before it had a chance to find its audience. Fact 8. The show started with a medical disclaimer. When Soap premiered on September 13, 1977, viewers witnessed television history being made in an unexpected way. They saw one of the first content warnings ever broadcast on American television. ABC made the unprecedented decision to include both a written disclaimer on screen and have announcer Roddy read a verbal warning before each episode during the entire first season. The disclaimer informed viewers that Soap was part of a continuing character comedy that included adult themes, and that viewer discretion was advised. This warning appeared as text on the television screen while Roddy simultaneously read the same message aloud, making sure that audiences understood they were about to watch something that might not be suitable for all viewers. This was revolutionary for 1977 television, when content warnings were virtually unknown on broadcast networks. Most television programming at the time was considered family-friendly by default, and networks rarely felt the need to warn viewers about potentially controversial material. The fact that ABC felt compelled to add this disclaimer showed just how nervous they were about the public reaction to Soap and how different this show was from anything else on television. The warning system was ABC's attempt to protect themselves from criticism, while still allowing the show to air with its controversial content intact. By alerting viewers in advance about the adult themes, the network could argue that they had given families the opportunity to make informed decisions about whether to watch the program or change the channel. The disclaimer remained in place throughout the entire first season, appearing before every single episode as Soap found its audience and proved that it could survive the initial wave of protests and boycotts. Once the show became established and the controversy began to die down, ABC quietly dropped the content warning starting with the second season. Today, content warnings are commonplace on television, appearing before everything from violent dramas to reality shows, but Soap was among the very first programs to pioneer this now standard practice in broadcast television. Fact 9. Advertisers cut commercial prices in half. The controversy surrounding Soap became so intense that ABC was forced to slash their advertising rates by nearly 50%, just to keep sponsors from completely abandoning the show, creating one of the most dramatic revenue drops in television history. The network had originally set commercial time during Soap at $75,000 per 30-second spot, which was a premium rate reflecting their confidence that the show would be a hit with audiences. However, as protests and boycotts mounted in the months leading up to the premiere, major advertisers began getting cold feet about being associated with such a controversial program. Companies that had initially committed to buying commercial time started worrying that their products would be boycotted by angry viewers who opposed the show's content, which could potentially cost them millions of dollars in lost sales. Some sponsors went beyond just expressing concerns and actually began canceling their advertising commitments entirely, leaving ABC with empty commercial slots and a rapidly shrinking revenue stream for one of their major new programs. The network found itself in the impossible position of trying to maintain advertiser confidence while also defending their right to broadcast innovative and boundary-pushing content. To prevent a complete advertiser exodus that could have killed Soap before it even had a chance to find its audience, ABC made the desperate decision to drop their commercial rates from $75,000 per spot down to just $40,000 per spot. This massive price reduction of $35,000 per commercial represented a 47% decrease in the show's advertising revenue. The price cut was ABC's way of making the advertising opportunity more attractive to nervous sponsors, while also reducing their financial risk if boycotts did materialize. By offering commercial time at a significant discount, the network hoped to convince advertisers that the potential benefits of reaching Soap's audience would outweigh the risks of being associated with controversial content. This financial sacrifice demonstrated just how much ABC believed in the show's potential and how far they were willing to go to protect it from the unprecedented level of opposition it was facing. Fact 10. The original Bob puppet lives in the Smithsonian. Bob Campbell, the rude and sarcastic wooden dummy who insulted his way through 4 seasons of Soap, now holds a place of honor in one of America's most prestigious museums. proving that even a 3-foot-tall ventriloquist figure can become a piece of television history. In May of 2007, Jay Johnson made the decision to donate his original Bob puppet to the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History in Washington, where it joined the institution's collection chronicling the evolution of American sitcom programs. The wooden figure that now sits in the Smithsonian is the exact same puppet that appeared in every episode of Soap from 1977 to 1981, making it a genuine artifact from one of television's most groundbreaking comedy series. Bob stands 3 feet tall with his distinctive apple cheeks, large eyes, and brown hair that made him instantly recognizable to millions of viewers who tuned in each week to see what outrageous things he would say next. Johnson revealed that Bob had undergone some maintenance over the years, joking that, like most celebrities, Bob has had some work done over the years, but with puppets you don't nip and tuck, you carve and sand. During the 30 years that Johnson worked with Bob, the puppet traveled around the world for performances and appearances, making him a well-traveled piece of entertainment history. The donation ceremony took place in New York City, where Johnson officially handed over his longtime partner to museum representatives who recognized Bob's significance in television history. The Smithsonian acquisition was part of their ongoing effort to preserve important artifacts from American popular culture, particularly items that represent major shifts in television programming and social attitudes. Bob's place in the National Museum of American History puts him alongside other iconic pieces of American entertainment history, ensuring that future generations will be able to see the actual puppet that helped break down barriers and push the boundaries of what was acceptable on television during the late 1970s. Fact 11. Roddy got his big break by accident. Roddy's path to becoming one of the most recognizable voices in television game show history began with a last-minute phone call when Soap desperately needed a replacement announcer, launching a career that would make him famous for shouting, "Come on down!" to millions of viewers. Roddy was working as a radio disc jockey and personality when he moved to Los Angeles hoping to break into television voiceover work, but he had no idea that his first television announcing job would come from stepping into such a controversial situation. When Casey Kasem abruptly quit Soap after recording just the pilot episode, the producers found themselves scrambling to find a new narrator who could handle the show's unique blend of comedy and drama while also being comfortable with its controversial content. Roddy was brought in as Kasem's replacement and immediately proved to be the perfect fit for the show's irreverent tone and complex storytelling. His work on Soap required him to deliver both the opening narration that introduced viewers to the complicated world of the Tate and Campbell families and the closing segments that posed dramatic questions to keep audiences coming back each week. Roddy's distinctive deadpan delivery became an essential part of the show's identity, with his famous closing phrase, "These questions and many others will be answered in the next episode of Soap," becoming instantly recognizable to fans. The experience Roddy gained on Soap from 1977 to 1981 provided him with the television skills and industry connections that would define the rest of his career. His first game show announcing job came in 1979 with Whoo! And he went on to work on several other game shows including Press Your Luck and Love Connection. In 1986, Roddy was chosen to replace Johnny Olsen as the announcer for The Price is Right, a position he held for 17 years until his death in 2003, making him the longest-serving announcer in the show's modern history. Fact 12. The show was filmed at the same studio as classic Hollywood. Soap was filmed at Columbia, divided by Sunset Gower Studios, located at 1438 North Gower Street in Hollywood, placing the groundbreaking sitcom in the heart of one of the entertainment industry's most historic and legendary production facilities. This studio complex had been a cornerstone of Hollywood filmmaking for decades before Soap ever went into production, and it continued to house major television and film projects long after the show ended its 4-season run. Columbia, divided by Sunset Gower Studios, was originally established as part of Columbia Pictures' extensive Hollywood operations, and over the years it became home to countless classic films and television shows that helped define American popular culture. The studio's sound stages and production facilities had witnessed the creation of major motion pictures, iconic television series, and breakthrough programming that shaped the entertainment landscape throughout the 20th century. When Soap moved into production at Columbia, divided by Sunset Gower in 1977, the cast and crew were working in the same spaces where Hollywood legends had created some of cinema's most memorable moments. The studio's rich history meant that Katherine Helmond, Billy Crystal, Richard Mulligan, and the rest of the soap ensemble were literally walking in the footsteps of generations of performers who had come before them. The choice to film at Columbia, divided by Sunset Gower, also reflected the show's connection to the broader television industry, as the facility was specifically equipped to handle the technical demands of weekly television production. The studio had the sound stages, equipment, and experienced crew members necessary to support the complex storytelling and ensemble cast that made Soap such an ambitious project. By filming at this legendary Hollywood location, Soap became part of a continuous tradition of entertainment production that stretched back to the golden age of Hollywood, even as the show itself was pushing television comedy into entirely new and controversial territory that had never been explored before. Fact 13. Several cast members were actual soap opera veterans. In one of the most ironic casting decisions in television history, Soap featured several actors who had spent years working on the very same daytime soap operas that the show was created to parody, bringing genuine insider knowledge to their comedic performances. These experienced soap opera performers understood the melodramatic acting style, complex storylines, and emotional intensity that defined daytime television, which made them perfect for a show that was both mocking and celebrating the genre. Robert Mandan, who played the philandering Chester Tate, had previously appeared as a leading man on Search for Tomorrow, one of the longest-running soap operas in television history. His experience playing romantic roles on daytime television gave him the perfect background for portraying Chester's endless string of affairs and his complicated relationships with the women in his life. Donnelly Rhodes, who joined Soap as Dutch Leitner in later seasons, had played the first husband of Catherine Chancellor on The Young and the Restless, giving him extensive experience with the kind of dramatic storylines that Soap was satirizing. His character Dutch became involved in some of the show's most outrageous plot developments, including Chester's prison escape and various romantic entanglements. Caroline McWilliams appeared on Soap as Sally, one of Bert's love interests, after spending time as Janet Mason Norris on the television version of Guiding Light. Arthur Peterson Jr., who played the senile Major on Soap, had even deeper soap opera roots, having portrayed Reverend John Rutledge on the radio version of Guiding Light decades earlier. Additionally, Marla Pennington, who played Billy Tate's unstable teacher Leslie Walker, had spent 3 years on General Hospital as Samantha Livingston Chandler. Having these genuine soap opera veterans in the cast added an extra layer of authenticity to Soap's parody, as they brought real understanding of the conventions and cliches they were now being asked to exaggerate for comedic effect. Fact 14. Katherine Helmond was nominated for 4 straight Emmys. Katherine Helmond's portrayal of the ditzy but lovable Jessica Tate was so consistently brilliant that she earned Emmy nominations for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series every single year that Soap was on the air, creating one of the most impressive streaks of recognition in television comedy history. From 1978 through 1981, Helmond received 4 consecutive nominations, demonstrating that the Television Academy recognized her exceptional talent even when the show itself was still controversial. Helmond's performance as Jessica Tate required her to balance multiple comedic elements while making the character genuinely sympathetic and endearing to audiences. Jessica was written as a wealthy, somewhat naive woman who often seemed oblivious to the chaos happening around her, but Helmond brought such warmth and intelligence to the role that viewers couldn't help but root for her despite her character's frequent confusion about what was going on in her own family. The actress had to master the art of playing someone who appeared simple on the surface while actually conveying deeper emotional truths about love, loyalty, and family relationships. Jessica's reactions to her husband Chester's constant affairs, her children's various crises, and the murder mystery that dominated the first season required Helmond to shift seamlessly between comedy and genuine pathos. In addition to her 4 Emmy nominations for Soap, Helmond also won a Golden Globe Award for Best Performance by an Actress in a TV Series, Musical, or Comedy in 1981, proving that her work was being recognized across multiple prestigious award organizations. The Golden Globe win was particularly significant because it came during the show's final season, when Soap had proven its lasting impact on television comedy. Helmond's remarkable run of nominations helped establish Soap as a serious artistic achievement rather than just a controversial curiosity, and her recognition from the Television Academy demonstrated that even the most boundary-pushing comedy could produce performances worthy of the industry's highest honors. Fact 15. The final episode was never meant to be final. Susan Harris had meticulously planned out 5 complete seasons of soap storylines in what the television industry calls a show Bible. But ABC's unexpected cancellation announcement turned what should have been a mid-series cliffhanger into one of the most frustrating series finales in television history. Harris had developed detailed character arcs, plot developments, and dramatic moments that would have carried the show through a 5th season and provided proper resolution to the complex storylines that had been building for 4 years. The final episode, which aired on April 20, 1981, was originally written as a typical soap cliffhanger that would leave audiences eagerly waiting for the next season to see how the various crises would be resolved. Instead, viewers were left with multiple unresolved storylines that would never be concluded, creating a permanent sense of incompleteness for one of television's most innovative comedies. The most dramatic cliffhanger involved Jessica Tate facing execution by a communist firing squad in South America, a typically outrageous soap plot development that was supposed to be resolved in the opening episodes of Season 5. Other unresolved storylines included Chester preparing to commit a murder-suicide after discovering his wife Annie in bed with his biological son Danny, Jody being hypnotized into believing he was a 90-year-old Jewish man, and Bert walking into what appeared to be a deadly political ambush. The cancellation was particularly sudden because soap was still attracting a loyal audience and had proven its cultural significance over 4 seasons. However, the show's controversial content had continued to create problems with advertisers, and ABC ultimately decided that the ongoing battles over content and sponsorship were not worth continuing. Despite the show's critical acclaim and devoted fanbase, Harris later indicated that if the show had continued to its planned 5th season, she would have revealed that the rifles used to execute Jessica contained blank bullets, allowing the character to survive in typical soap fashion.